Fans, I am really excited about the UFC lightweight division again. I think this is one of the divisions to keep an eye on in the UFC. I wouldn't say it's the best division. I still think the welterweight division is the best division in terms of depth. But I'm really interested to see what the next couple years could look like for the lightweight division. For a long time, this was a division which perhaps lacked some fresh talent, but now there's a lot of up and coming fighters who are looking very promising, and you still have some mainstay names who have been around for a long time but are still very prominent. I mean, Justin Gaethje is the champion. He's 37 years of age. He's previously challenged for the title and been unsuccessful. He's been around for a long time, and him becoming champion tells a great story. It's really satisfying for diehard UFC fans to see him at the top of the food chain. But then you've got number one, Ilya Topuria, the guy who he beat for that title at Freedom 250. And I know Topuria's stock would have taken a hit because he lost to Gaethje and he lost in quite a convincing way. But you still have to remember this is a guy who a lot of people were thinking is the pound for pound best fighter in the world before that fight and has still knocked out some legends. He's also really young. I mean, Topuria is not hit 30. So this guy could be around for a long time. And even though he had a bad night at Freedom 250, there's still some big signs that he could be a prominent feature in this division for a long time. And then number two is Arman Sarukian, who I think deserves to be the next contender for Gaethje's title. I think this guy should have had a title fight probably about a year ago at earliest. To be honest, he's probably the best fighter in the division, if I'm being honest. But doesn't get the recognition he deserves. Hasn't really had the best relationship with Dana White. I think, from my opinion, even though there's a couple other names that people are throwing around for a title fight, Arman Sarukian has to be the next in line to challenge Gaethje, or the first in line to challenge Gaethje, but the next in line for a title shot. And then as you go further down these rankings, Charles Oliveira is the BMF champion. He's on a 2-fight winning streak. You've also got Max Holloway, who won against Conor McGregor, albeit in quite dubious fashion. I know that fight was highly disappointing, but Holloway is still a big name. He's a former featherweight champion. He's a legend in this sport. And I think just coming off of a win against Conor McGregor in any capacity, even though it's in quite contentious circumstances, still puts you in the public eye in this sport. And then Paddy Pimblett, he's climbed up to number 5 in these rankings. He's somebody who I always liked as a character and thought was a great fighter, but didn't really prove himself against top tier competition. I mean, his most notable win up until recently was against Michael Chandler. But after beating Benoit Saint Denis, Paddy Pimblett is now firmly in title contention. You have to say, if he can get another 2 wins perhaps and go on a bit of a winning streak, he's up there in title contention and he's going to fulfill that potential of being a title challenger, a real title challenger, which I think a lot of people feel he can definitely hit. And because he's so marketable, you can expect the UFC are going to push him hard. Number 6, then Benoit Saint Denis. I mean, I thought if Benoit Saint Denis beat Paddy Pimblett, he probably should be next in line after Arman Sarukian for a title shot. But he came up short. It was a bad loss for him at UFC 329. But Benoit Saint Denis is still such a great fighter to watch. His fights are always very physical. He likes to throw bombs. I think he's somebody who, if he can get on a good run again, with enough time left in the tank, given that he's still at a decent age, he could be a problem in this division. I'm not sure he's necessarily going to be champion, but I do think if he puts a decent run together, which is possible, he could potentially challenge for the title, although I don't think he'll necessarily be champion. And then number 7, Mauricio Hufi. I mean, this is another guy who has great power in his fists, likes to knock guys out, very capable. After that win against Michael Chandler at Freedom 250, I think he's somebody who people are starting to realize isn't just an entertaining fighter, but he's also a very good fighter in terms of his skill set. And I think he's somebody at such a young age could be a real problem in this division for a long time. That's the top 7 in these UFC meta rankings. I think there's so much potential in terms of what you can do with these rankings. I think Justin Gaethje versus Arman Sarukian for the title has to be next. I'll then say Paddy Pimblett versus Ilya Topuria is a really interesting fight because they're both in the top 5, but also they both hate each other. That always adds a bit of spice. I would like to see Mauricio Hufi taking on Charles Oliveira. I wonder if that could potentially be for the BMF title. Why not? I mean, Oliveira's got that BMF title. A lot of people aren't sure who he's necessarily going to fight and defend against next. Why not make it Hufi, Brazil versus Brazil? I think both guys have very different styles. There is always a risk with Oliveira that he's not going to make it the most entertaining fight, and it might be quite ground focused. But I think with Hufi, he's going up against somebody who has the potential to really make it physical and on the feet. And that will be really, really fascinating stylistically. And then Benoit Saint Denis, who does he fight next? Well, I think you could argue there's maybe, you know, a couple fights further down for BSD. Do you put him in there against someone else who's a bit lower down in these rankings? You could perhaps consider that. But I think looking down past the top seven, you still got some really interesting fighters here. You've got Moicano, who's recently won against Chris Duncan, previously challenged for the belt. I don't think he'll ever get a title shot again, but still can pull up a good fight. Rafael Fizie's coming off of a win recently, another very physical fighter, someone else who has power in his fists. But then check out Australia, number 12 and 13 ranked. Quillan Salkian and Tom Nolan. Australia getting some representation in these lightweight rankings, which is very interesting to see because it's not a country which has previously produced a lot of high-level fighters, with the exception of Alexander Volkanovski, obviously being a contender in this division previously. So the lightweight division's looking really interesting. I mean, these are the pound for pound, these are the lightweight meta rankings for the lightweight division. But if you go to the UFC's pound for pound rankings, you get some very, very interesting findings here. You get 4 guys from the lightweight division. That's actually more than the welterweight division in these rankings. So this is clearly a very interesting division and one that has a lot of potential to give us some real entertainment in the next 2 years. So I'm fascinated to see what the UFC does next with the lightweight division. It's obviously a division which has a lot of history. I mean, when you look at some of the guys who have held the lightweight championship before, you're talking about some real notable names. Names who have really helped transform the sport and grow the sport. Some real classic rivalries in this division over the years as well. I think this is definitely a really exciting time, which can really add a real layer to the UFC's depth and make this division meaningful again. The lightweight division has always been a division of interest for the fans, but I think for a long time it's maybe been living off of reputation. Now it's definitely living on what the present looks like, and that's because there are several really good fighters in this division. So let's see what happens. I'm really interested to see what the UFC does next. Let me know what fights you want to see at lightweight. I'm really intrigued to hear your thoughts.